In today's video, I'm going to talk a little bit about how sociological influences can shape our development. Sociological influences can involve any type of interaction that we have with other people. There are two major factors that we specifically look at as being critical in shaping a child's development. Those two factors are attachment and parenting styles. You can view these two factors as being in a symbiotic relationship, with attachment describing how a child views their caregiver and parenting styles describing how the caregiver views their role with the child. Because this is the first social relationship a young child will make, it's critical to shaping how that child will view others and other social relationships throughout their life. Let's start by talking about attachment. Attachment can be defined as a long-standing connection or bond with others. There's an instinct for newborns to bond with their birth mothers. This only makes sense because the child has just spent 9 months inside the mother. Early in their life, they also develop preferences for the sound of their mother's voice. They can even identify their mother's face and can distinguish their smell. Although this is a natural instinct, it should be noted that for a variety of reasons, sometimes the birth mother just isn't in the picture for the child. And in those cases, other caregivers can certainly fulfill this role too. One of the key components for fostering healthy attachment between child and caregiver is that the caregiver is viewed by the child as being a secure base. Secure base means that the caregiver's presence helps give the child a sense of safety and security that then gives them the confidence they need to explore their surroundings. I like to think of the secure base as being like the child's security blanket. When they feel afraid, when they feel scared, when they feel threatened, they can go to their caregiver and feel safe and secure until that fear subsides. There are different types of attachment that have been identified. The first type of attachment is called secure attachment. This is one area in psychology where we definitely say that one way is better than others. Secure attachment is the only healthy form of attachment between caregiver and child. With secure attachment, the child views their caregiver as being a secure base and will use their caregiver's presence to help make themselves feel safe and confident. There are 3 other types of attachment styles, and they are all termed insecure attachment. With these attachment styles, the children do not view their caregiver as being a secure base. So we have insecure avoidant, or sometimes also known as dismissive, insecure resistant, which is also sometimes called insecure anxious or ambivalent, and finally insecure disorganized. The first psychologist to help identify these different types of attachment styles was a woman named Mary Ainsworth. The way she studied attachment styles was to devise a study known as the strange situation. Essentially what she did was had young mothers come in with their children and spend time with them inside a small room. After they were in the room for a short period of time, a stranger would come into the room and the mother would leave. A short while later, the mother would return and the stranger would leave. Mary Ainsworth and her research assistants would monitor how the children acted with their mothers after their mothers had left the room and upon their mother's return. It should be noted that although Mary Ainsworth studied mothers and their children, that these attachment styles aren't just specific to mothers and children, but they can be applied to anybody who forms the role of primary caregiver for their child. So with children that had secure attachment, they were happy when they were with their mothers. When the stranger came into the room and the mother left, they would become upset, but then when the mother returned and the stranger left, they would calm down. They'd feel more safe, more secure because of their mother's presence. With insecure avoidant or dismissive children, they'd be somewhat unresponsive to their mother. And there wouldn't really be a change between how the child would act when the mother left and the stranger was present. This can usually happen from parents that are consistently cold and distant with their children and can lead to the child developing a similar amount of distance and other types of social relationships throughout their life. With insecure resistant or anxious ambivalent children, The child would be fine with the mothers when they were present, but when the stranger entered the room and the mother left, they basically would just start to freak out. In fact, a lot of times they were kind of like inconsolable. However, when the mother returned and the stranger left, the children would be difficult to comfort and sometimes would even seem to be angry with the mother for having left in the first place. Often, these types of children can be extremely clingy. It can be brought about from parents that are inconsistent with the amount of attention and care that they provide to their children. Essentially, the child never really knows if they're going to have a caring and loving parent or a cold and distant one, so it makes them very desperate for attention and support. Many times, children with this type of attachment style may be overly needy or clingy in other social relationships later in life as well. The final type of attachment style is insecure disorganized, and it was really more of a catch-all category for children that didn't really display consistent behavior or exhibited behavior that was bizarre. For example, in the strange situation study, these children may have been distant or cold with their mother, but then friendly and happy with the stranger, or maybe equally friendly and happy with both the stranger and their mother. Because this is a catch-all category, there are many reasons why a child may display disorganized attachment. Sometimes it can be the result of abuse or severe neglect, but it can also reflect other issues like autism, developmental issues, or even just really unique personality traits with that kid. As I mentioned earlier, the social bond between caregiver and child is based on attachment, but also is based on the caregiver's individual parenting style. There are four main types of parenting style that I'm going to be talking about, and those are authoritative, authoritarian, permissive, and neglectful, or sometimes that's referred to as uninvolved. The way I like to explain these styles is based upon two main factors. Those factors are whether the parent gives warmth and support and love to their children, and whether the parent disciplines their child. This reminds me of that old saying about either you learn through the carrot or you learn through the stick. So in this case, the carrot would be the warmth, love, support that a parent gives to a child. And the stick would be the punishment that a parent gives the child. Please understand though that I'm not literally saying the parent hits their kid with sticks or gives carrots as a reward. It's just an analogy. So let's start by talking about authoritative parenting. Just like secure attachment is the only healthy form of attachment, authoritative parenting is the only healthy way to parent a child. With authoritative parenting, the parent gives reasonable demands and consistent limits. They express warmth and affection and listen to the child's point of view. Parents set rules and explain the reasons behind them, but they're also flexible and willing to make exceptions to rules in certain cases. With the authoritarian style, the parent places high value on conformity and obedience. Oftentimes, this means the parents are very strict and closely monitor their children and will express very little warmth or support. Going back to my analogy of the carrot and the stick, with authoritarian parents, they don't really care about the carrot and they rely more on the stick. So basically, they're all about rules and discipline. Oftentimes, authoritarian parents will even view things like praise, support, and warmth as being counterproductive. They may view these things as spoiling their children, so they avoid it at all costs. Usually, children raised by authoritarian parents tend to be anxious and withdrawn, and overall tend to be less happy. I do want to make sure I point out that an authoritarian parent doesn't necessarily mean that that parent is abusive or uses physical discipline. The complete opposite of an authoritarian parent is a permissive parent. With permissive parents, they're all about the carrot and not about the stick. In fact, oftentimes, these types of parents may be really strongly opposed to any types of rules or discipline. While at first this may sound beneficial, it's important to remember that children need boundaries. They need rules, and they need to know that there are consequences for when they don't follow those rules. Therefore, children raised by permissive parents oftentimes tend to be lacking in self-discipline and have less motivation and generally do worse academically and professionally later in life. Probably one of the most damaging types of parenting styles, though, is the uninvolved or neglectful parent. These parents are the exact opposite of an authoritative parenting style, so they don't give the carrot and they don't really give the stick. By and large, they're not responsive to their children's needs, and typically their children are not a priority for them. A lot of times you can see this with parents that may have addictions or that may have a focus on work or friends or something else other than their children. So their children usually don't come first. In fact, a lot of times they come last. Children raised by uninvolved or neglectful parents usually are emotionally withdrawn, fearful, anxious, they perform poorly in school, and have an increased risk of substance abuse later in life. It's worth repeating that the parenting styles and attachment styles are symbiotic. So oftentimes the way that a child reacts to the parent can shape the parenting styles and vice versa. The more knowledge, support, and experience a parent has, the better they're able to respond to their children and help foster a healthier caregiver-child relationship. It's also worth noting that what I talked about today about how certain attachment styles can lead to issues with social relationships later in life and how different parenting styles can influence the development of a child speaks more to a correlation than it does a causation. What I mean is that development is far more complicated than to simply say that because you had a bad parent, that means you're going to do poorly in life. While it may be true that it can impair your development and lead to issues that you'll have to face at some point in your life, there are plenty of examples of people who came from horrible backgrounds and still did amazingly well. And the opposite, sadly, sometimes is also true, where people came from wonderful backgrounds and still had a lot of issues later in life. In the end, it's a reminder of just how complicated and dynamic our development really can be. If you're enjoying content like this, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and give me a like by pressing the thumbs up icon below. This helps me to continue to expand these videos and provide amazing content to all of my viewers. Thanks for watching, everybody.